A radio show host in Seattle called Paul Gallant.
You are definitely living in the hindsight world today, Paul.
Do you feel there's been a consistent theme with the interceptions?
I think every interception really has a different story.
I was just kind of curious what Paul gets to say.
You got f***ing grow up, mother. Are you kidding me?
Paul Gallant, what the hell is wrong with you?
Here we go. Jesus. I don't know what it is about the actual audio quality issues that I've been having on the Gallant Says podcast, but it does seem to be a regular occurrence. But only took 3 minutes to fix that. Hello and welcome aboard. Another episode of the Gallant Says podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud. It is also available live, twitch.tv/Gallant Says, youtube.com/Paul Gallant. You can watch me and you can interact with the show live on this Thursday, January 5th of 2023. I'm back. I've said this a million times before, but since it's 2023, guys, I've got a resolution. I'm going to try to do this every single day of the week at 1 o'clock Central Time. Then I will post it to the podcast feed after it's done. Hopefully, the podcast will actually post by the end of the day. Have been debating perhaps doing things where I would go live on Sunday night so that on Friday, whatever show I do becomes a little less stressful. Maybe I do something where it's Ask Me Anything and I play a video game along the way, do Twitch streaming the old-fashioned way, but I think for now, we just got to work on doing this thing every single day at 1 o'clock Central Time. So that's what we're going to try to do. It has been an interesting week in the world of sports as we all check back in from the holidays, Christmas, New Year's Eve, New Year's Day. Not going to lie, had myself a bit of a bender over the New Year's Eve weekend. Thursday went hard. Friday went hard. Saturday went hard. Sunday went hard and tried to go harder. Monday debated even going out again. That would have been 5 straight days. So currently, I'm recovering, I guess you could say. We all checked back in, though, to the sporting world on Monday night with what on paper looked like it was going to be a very memorable, very exciting game between the Josh Allen-led Buffalo Bills and the Joe Burrow-led Cincinnati Bengals. We've seen Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes duel. Of course, we want to see Joe Burrow and Josh Allen duel. And unfortunately, we didn't get to really watch football. I'll be honest, I wasn't paying 100% attention to the game. I was still doing some errands around the house, and I think I was listening to podcasts. I had the game on my television, but I had it on mute. And I remember looking up at one point and trying to figure out what the hell happened to the actual game, because all of a sudden I saw there was a studio panel. Susie Colbert, Adam Schefter, Booger McFarland sitting around in a circle. And I thought, is this some sort of alternative ESPN broadcast? What's going on? So that's when I committed full attention to the actual game after looking down for a while. They weren't showing any replays, but they said something awful had happened. And I went online and I looked up and I saw Bills safety Damar Hamlin trying to tackle Bengals wide receiver T. Higgins, where Higgins put a lot of force by shoulder into Hamlin. Hamlin goes down, but he makes the tackle, gets up, collapses. Then you see, after a pause, you're thinking, okay, maybe he's knocked out. We're so desensitized, aren't we, watching football? Hey, maybe he has a spinal injury, worse than that, or a torn ACL or something. But why would they be pausing the game? Why would there be this alternative broadcast? And then you see just the zoomed-in faces of Josh Allen, who looked like he saw someone die, of Stephon Diggs, who was crying. And you realize that this is going to be probably the topic du week and perhaps topic of the offseason about football safety, but more importantly, about whether or not we just saw a 24-year-old in Damar Hamlin die. A guy who, by all accounts, seems to be an incredible stand-up person who's all about the community, positive role model, like all sorts of great things. He's a 24-year-old person. You know, I'm 33. I probably shouldn't be calling anybody kids at this point in time, but God, that's the first thing that's going through my head. Man, what bad fucking luck. And I sat back, and this is one of those moments where if you're in sports media or as a broadcaster, you are expected to have an opinion on just about everything. So I tried to think about something to say. I have to weigh in on it, don't I? Or maybe I don't, and maybe that's a Twitter problem that's been created by that fucking shithole of an app. But all I could think of was, God, the kid's 24 years old, and I hope everything's okay. And then I tried to remember other situations and sporting events that are similar. One of them was when I watched Gary Kubiak collapse around halftime of that game between the Texans and Colts in 2013. What a shit show of a game that was. Remember Case Keenum had 3 first-half touchdown passes. Kubiak has the stroke. He goes to the hospital. He ends up being okay. There also was an incident in 1999 where Larry Dierker, then the Astros manager, had a stroke in, I think, the 8th inning. Or grand mal seizure, my bad. And, I mean, on the broadcast, you could see him twitching. I have not looked up the review because I don't want to see it. But he was out for a month. They paused the game, and they resumed it about a month later, the next time the Astros and Padres played one another. But the game was stopped, and it seems, at least as we currently stand, and it's 1:09 Central Time on January 5th of 2023, like that game between the Bills and Bengals has been canceled forever. It is done. There will be some sort of, I imagine, no contest that's put in. I don't know if it gets scored as a tie. I don't know if it gets scored as just, you know, they played one less game. It's going to make things in the AFC seating a little bit interesting, but, you know, the first thing I think any human out there is thinking is, fuck, did I just watch someone die? And if you're someone who's played football, I think this hits a little bit differently for you. We've all seen messed up injuries if you've played the sport. I remember my junior year of high school, we were playing Fort Meade, a really good football team. Their quarterback was a talented player. He runs on a scramble one play, and all of a sudden you hear screaming, and I'm lucky I didn't see it because people got in the way, but a couple of my teammates threw up because, it was a compound fracture. Bone was sticking through the skin. And you were like, is this guy going to walk again? It's not like he's living in the best area in Florida when it comes to getting medical attention. Hell, there was a moment in my sophomore year of high school where I was on punt return coverage, and the team faked a punt, and somehow some big fucking behemoth guy who's probably like 6'2", 6'3", I would definitely say 240 pounds or more, got downfield on me, and me, 5'5" at the time, 110 pounds. Like, all I was good at was running. I just got fucking just dropped. I couldn't breathe for about, I want to say it felt like about a minute. But I was on the ground, and I think my parents thought I was dead. I think my teammates thought I was dead. Like, shit happens in football a lot. Sometimes kids die. We've seen that at the high school level happen. I think there were 4 deaths in 2020. Maybe it was 2021. Yeah, 2021 seems more likely given that 2020, I think a lot of stuff was shut down. But like that's what you think about, just that this game is so fucking violent and that things like this can happen at any moment in time. And then you see it happen on national TV, and it just hits you a lot differently. So to go back to where I was, sports broadcaster Paul, feeling like I need to have an opinion, I thought to myself, you know what, that's probably enough. I don't need to offer any more here. I don't really know what else to say. So I'm watching the broadcast, and I'm glad that things are getting better for Damar Hamlin, because now I can actually cackle at this. For those who don't know, Damar Hamlin's beginning to wake up as part of substantial improvement over the past 24 hours. And this is where we are going to laugh very hard, because this sounds like it's straight out of a fucking movie. Doctors say Damar Hamlin asked via writing who won the game on Monday. The doctor's response: "You won. You won life." That's perfect. And we needed something like this because it has been a really sobering last couple of days. And I know some people are out there thinking it's kind of crazy that the game stopped when no one died, but I totally understand why it happened. Sean McDermott said, "I want to be at the hospital with Hamlin." I think that's a fucking stand-up dude saying that. And that's why the game got paused. It was the coaches who stepped in and had the actual power there. And if I'm one of those players, sorry, I know I'm paid to do a job, but I'm not going to be doing a very good job. Hell, I might not be doing a very good job this weekend if I'm anyone. I think it hits players differently, and I understand there are some people who are a little callous to it and think, like, hey, get the fuck back out there. Get back to work. You're getting paid millions of dollars. This is a violent game. You know what you signed up for. But there's a part of me that realizes it's a different world that they live in, and I'm not going to tell somebody that they should feel differently than the way that I do. But I know how a lot of us feel. We're like, oh, shake it off, or, let's get back to the games. But it was funny. Now, in retrospect, I can say it was funny, especially after that quote. My God, that is straight out of a movie. The doctor's response: "You won. You won life." Now we can get back to making fun of some of the awkwardness of the whole situation, right? I mean, imagine you are Joe Buck or Troy Aikman, and you're there, and like, what are you supposed to say? I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on. Let's throw it back to the studio. And the studio then would go around in a circle saying, football's more than a game. And also, this is about more than a game. It's about humanity. It's about people. It's about love. It's about heart. It's about brotherhood. It's about friendship. It's about camaraderie. It was really funny watching them all go around in a circle, like awkwardly trying to fucking like talk about this. How do you talk about it? And then they would throw it back to Joe Buck and Troy Aikman. And Joe Buck and Troy Aikman would say, yeah, we don't really have anything new. It doesn't look good. Hey, back to the studio. And then Adam Schefter would continue to say, this isn't about football. This is about people. It's fantastic. I'm sorry. I got a kick out of that. So I'm glad Hamlin's doing better. First off, because, Jesus, what a tragedy it would be if a 24-year-old lost his life playing football in what is really just a bang-bang routine kind of play, like 1 in a million kind of moment for that to take place like that, where his lungs, essentially, it seems like they got stopped. His heart stopped too. Like Jesus. Awful. But the other part is, too, now we can have a little fun with this. But we had to wait until now. And this is the tricky part about being a sports broadcaster. There are do's and don'ts in situations like this. So let's go to, something tweeted by Skip Bayless. And if you're watching on twitch.tv/Gallant Says, youtube.com/Paul Gallant, you can actually read along with this. And we'll get to some of your comments in just a moment. No doubt the NFL is considering postponing the rest of this game. But how? This late in the season, a game of this magnitude is crucial to the regular season outcome, which suddenly seems so irrelevant. I first saw this on a couple of group chats that I'm in. One is a bunch of Houston area friends, a lot of Texas A&M Aggies. And the other group was a bunch of my buddies from Syracuse. And both people put it out there like, are you fucking kidding me, Skip? And I don't know if this is the broadcaster in me, the sports talk show host in me, trying to zig or zag, but I was like, well, I mean, he said it suddenly seems so irrelevant. And before that, if you take a look on Twitter, he said not exactly sure what happened to Damar Hamlin. Players in both teams are shaken. Ambulance out on the field. CPR administered. Can't remember playing being stopped for this length of time. Just said a prayer for him and his family. Like, even Skip's being a bit of a human in this situation, as much as he can be. I've seen so many horrific injuries suffered on football fields, yet never have I seen a reaction like this in every other situation I witnessed or covered. The game always went on fairly quickly. The attitude was, hey, that's football. For these players, this was different. And I mean, that's an astute point too. And then afterwards, he said, nothing is more important than that young man's health. That was the point of my last tweet. I am sorry if it was misunderstood, but his health is all that matters. Again, everything else is irrelevant. I prayed for him and will continue to. I got to say this about all of those tweets in totality. Skip probably should have turned this into a Twitter thread. Because if you put something out there on Twitter, people are going to isolate the one that they don't like and fucking tear you apart on it. And this is what happens with 280 characters or less. I don't know if people saw that I was, I think, tweeting about, like, hey, like an undersized quarterback behind a bad offensive line. How's that going to go? And I said, like, some of Russell Wilson and Kyler Murray's bad habits are really being shown. And I remember Sean Pendergast responded to it, and he said, like, what? He basically seemed to imply, and maybe I'm wrong. I texted him. He didn't text me back, that I was criticizing Russ. But I was like, no, Russ can't see over the line of scrimmage. You can't see 10 yards downfield. And I think anyone who's followed the Seahawks, they know that. So in that moment, Skip Bayless gets roasted for a tweet that honestly is pretty innocuous. This is a guy who said 5 days after 9/11 that players are essentially doing the United States a disservice by not going back to play after 9/11, by refusing to play. Like, that, by Skip Bayless, that is worse. But here's what's fun. The day after the Monday Night Football game and the day after the tweet, Shannon Sharp on Undisputed, who seems to be having some issues with Skip Bayless. There's been a couple of awkward pieces of video over the last couple of months. Sharp just didn't show up to work, which I think is a pussy move. No offense to Shannon Sharp, who could kick my ass, obviously. Show up to work, dude. It's a debate show. That's your job. Unless he was trying to play some sort of hardball to get Bayless off the show, which I'm sure he did if he didn't show up. Trying to show that he is irreplaceable. Skip is the irreplaceable one on that show, though. I don't think he's quite the ratings drawer that he used to be. Skip, I feel like, should have had a co-host on for that show. It got awkward. If you watched that episode, I mean, Bayless is essentially somewhat apologetic at the beginning, but I don't think he really needed to be. And at one point in the show, he says, I root for LeBron James. I'm a LeBron James fan now. And then he starts talking about his, like, svelte body and stuff. Excuse me for a moment. Tree allergies, guys. Absolute worst. So, Shannon comes back yesterday, and he decides to open up the show with a monologue of his own. Let's see. Can I actually get the audio of this? Can you guys hear this? Let's see if the levels are actually playing. I think they are. Can't hear it on Twitch? Okay, I figured that was going to be the problem. We're having audio issues today. The awkward exchange when he comes back in to the fold was fucking hysterical. Because Skip goes on... Excuse me. Shannon Sharp goes on a monologue, and he says, like, you know, blah, 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 blah. The Brotherhood talks about how his brother was paralyzed in the middle of a game, so it's a little bit personal to him. But at one point he says, Skip tweeted something. I don't agree with it. I wish he'd delete it. When he said that, of course, Skip has to insert himself back in. It's a debate show, and your co-host just said, I think you should delete the tweet. And Bayless said, no, I stand by it. We had a conversation off the air. I thought this wasn't going to be brought up. I'm just supposed to move on from it. And Sharp gets indignant and said, blah, 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 blah. And the next thing you know, we get back into these two bickering with each other like an old married couple. It was fucking hilarious. Now, is this a ratings ploy or something like that? I don't know. Undisputed does very poorly, numbers-wise. Skip gets paid a lot. Fox does treat their employees a lot better than ESPN does. There's no denying that. But in that moment in time, you do have to wonder with the way that these two guys are feeling and the way that people are coming after Skip, if this show is long for this world. We'll see. I do wish I could figure out what the audio issues are on this show right now, because there's a couple other pieces of audio that I do want to play for you. Because I guess that's the don't of when we're talking about sports broadcasting when it comes to a situation like Damar Hamlin. Like, don't say really that much at all. Sometimes you just don't even need to say anything at all. And I didn't want to talk about, hey, what's up next for the AFC or anything like that after the fact. No, absolutely not. Let's see if this works. This is riveting podcasting. Can you hear it now? See, it says it's playing over the internet on my mixer, but it's not actually playing. It's fucking ridiculous. Sorry, guys. It's getting on my nerves the way that things are going with this. Every single time I get back into it, I'm like, oh yeah, I need a producer. I need help. Blah, 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 blah. Kill me with the shovel. Okay. So the way I handled it was just not to say that much and hope for the best. And I hope for a time where we can actually laugh at some of this shit. Because I like to laugh at the way that we cover things as someone who's worked in sports media. And that's why I think it's so fucking funny the way that Clay Travis, noted grifter, who is completely full of shit. Clay Travis has messaged multiple people that I know privately, essentially implying that his shtick is an act. And people ask me, hey, politically, Paul, where do you lean? I mean, I guess if you have to put me inside of a box, I suppose I am more conservative than I am liberal. But I'm not some sort of like black and white conservative, Like I have different stances on a lot of different things. Let's just run through some of them, for example. I don't care who you fuck. In fact, I don't care about anything that you do at all. I suppose that makes me libertarian. I am definitely somebody that shudders at the idea of irresponsible government spending, and I do think that most things that involve you paying the government are going to result in very irresponsible government spending. What else do I believe? I think that when it comes to things like abortion, personally, I'm not for it. And I also think that a lot of the conversation about it is had by people who were perhaps irresponsible when having sex. And I feel like, hey, like, wear a condom, use birth control. And that's against certain people's religions. And, I don't want to dive down that rabbit hole either. I'm just saying, like, sometimes the conversation about abortion seems to be a get out of jail free card for people who fuck up. And I'm of the belief that, like, you have such a slight chance of existing. The sperm and the egg, they need to meet. And to deny the possible existence of that person who might come and have a fucked up, childhood and be bouncing around from place to place if they're not wanted by their parents. To deny someone a chance at existence, I think, is wrong. But I'm also not someone who's going to tell somebody else you should feel that way. I'm not like that. I know how I believe about things, and I think that the Republican Party was a bunch of fucking idiots trying to essentially go for the overkill when they were clearly going to destroy the Democrats in some of those midterms and congressional elections. They decided to throw this in, and it made a lot of people like come back to the center and say like, oh, wait, they're kind of crazy. So they fucked that up. So I'm sorry for the long tangent, but those are some of the things I politically believe. I think I probably lean conservative. My friends always make fun of me for leaning conservative, specifically my friends from college, whatever. You are what you are. You have different beliefs, and you don't need to be lined up uniformly with every single belief of the of the party that you generally vote for. But to bring it back to Clay Travis, I don't think actually believes the things that he says. I think he is great at finding a way to get people pissed off in this weird half sports, half politics world that he's in. And I mean, that's something I've been curious about exploring myself. I feel like I actually am capable of talking about politics and sports. I did conservative talk radio in Seattle. I did it in Kansas City. You might not have known that over the course of the last 2 years. So I enjoy talking about politics. I feel like I'm good at it. But also, I'm not someone that's gonna fucking lie to you. I'll be sarcastic, but I'll tell you what I believe, and I think Clay Travis is full of shit. And Clay Travis saw this Damar Hamlin situation, to get to my point, as a way to grift, as a way to create content. Here's a tweet that he had, and I'd play the video. It's of Joe Biden talking. 6 foot. I don't know why I'm sounding like Bum Phillips. I can't do it. We'll work on the Biden impersonation. But Joe Biden is asked if he thinks the NFL is getting too dangerous by a woke media member. And he actually manages a decent answer here. But left-wingers are coming for football. Get ready. Then Travis tweeted out a video of Joy Behar and a bunch of other people in The View, which seems like a fucking terrible show, about how 45% of Americans believe tackle football should be legal. Most of these people are heterosexual men and conservatives. What does that fucking mean? And he continues to double down on this idea that the left wing is coming for football. Football is hyper-masculine, super competitive, and based on the meritocracy. Players are also very religious. This is everything left-wingers hate. The Kaepernick support was really about hating football, not as protest. Football equals toxic masculinity. Buckle up, they're coming. In the years ahead, female cheerleaders, predicts Clay Travis, will be unacceptable in the far left wing in this country. They will spread rapidly. Good-looking, fit women cheering for men will become targets because they perpetuate the patriarchy. Y'all think I'm crazy? Bookmark this. No, I'm not going to, because you're full of shit and you're overplaying this. There was a war on football like a decade ago with the concussions. The league's more popular than it was before. Maybe it's a little bit less violent than it was before, but, 10 years ago, nothing changed. You put out the idea, though, that you should be scared about something that could potentially happen, and boom, you got content, you got people responding to your tweets, you got people yelling at each other. That's what you want. You want the engagement, and that's what you do. If you're Clay Travis, who is full of shit, he is. Is he smarter than me? Probably. He's found a way to monetize this. I'm not going to act like I'm some genius. I'm not. I know what I know, and I know what I don't know. But I know this is bullshit. I know that is grift. And, he's shameless with it. You're using a fucking terrifying moment in sports to bring back the sports world equivalent of the war on Christmas. That's what he did. Resolutions going forward for the Paul Gallant Show, though, as someone who doesn't want to be Clay Travis, but who would like to kind of step outside of the realm of sports, at the very least on this show, when I do it every single day. I am trying to become more of an expert on things outside the sports world. I feel pretty confident in my knowledge about football especially, but most things around the world of sports. Baseball, less so. Basketball, less so than football, too. But there are other things that I find more interesting, and I think that occasionally the routine conversation about like, oh, should the Texans draft Bryce Young at first overall? Like, fuck that, That's what it's going to be probably the next 3 to 4 months. And if you do listen to the Paul Gallant Show on ESPN 97.5 and 92.5, you're going to be hearing a lot of that. Sorry, like we have to play inside, we have to play to the demographic that is listening to us. And I mean, I'm not a big fan of draft conversation, but that's something that we'll do. But when we're not, and when we're doing this, I want to go into worlds that I'm really interested in. For example, I've been reading this book. It's called The Devil's Chessboard. It's a fascinating read, in case you've never seen it before. And you might see I've got like a bunch of Post-it notes in there with notes that I've taken along the way. Great book. And what's fascinating about it is just exposing the CIA and the deep state of the United States and all the fucked up stuff that they have done historically. I'm at the point right now where it's a pretty compelling case to be made that the CIA was behind the assassination of John F. Kennedy. And in this book, which is about Allen Dulles and the CIA and the rise of America's secret government, from the beginning, Allen Dulles is kind of a piece of shit. This is a guy who, before the end of World War II, is like, we need to bring as many Nazis into the United States as we possibly can. We need to create a buffer zone across Europe to stop the communist expanse. He was very big into manipulating policy all across the world. And to a point where he very clearly had more power than President Dwight Eisenhower. And to go a little bit further, when JFK was pushing back against this establishment, they started to get uneasy. And again, you could see why maybe they felt like he was a problem that needed to be dealt with. Read the book. It's a fascinating read. I'm almost done. But after that's done, I want to focus on what's going on at our border, the United States border with Mexico. And not so much because I feel like we need to build a wall or something like that. I am just fascinated by the actual history between the United States and Mexico, but also what's been going on with the drug wars that are taking place. Last night I was watching a Netflix documentary about El Chapo, and I found out today that El Chapo's son was arrested, and I guess the Sinaloa cartel is trying to free him. They are trying their hardest with the paramilitary forces that they have, which have pretty awesome weapons, especially relative to the Mexican army. They're trying to get him out of jail. So I actually bought another book, and this is something that over the course of this year's show, I want to talk about, because I want to become an expert when it comes to it. I live in Texas, right? And if there is a world where I can, I don't know, like, talk about politics too, well, why not talk about what's going on in your backyard? Very easy to do in Seattle for those who listen to my show there, because every single day there was some ridiculous headline when I was filling conservative talk radio that was about, what was it about? Hey, like a man breaks into an apartment with an axe. He's released on his own recognizance, even though he's like been arrested multiple times for assault. Like this shit like that happened every single day in Seattle, where you're like, this is easy. Conservative talk radio in Seattle is great for the people that actually want to hear it. The city's a fucking joke with a lot of things that they do. But I want to become an expert on what's going on at the border and know more about cartels. Hopefully none of them want to come across and kill me or anything like that. But I am very fascinated by what led to the point where we're at right now, where there is an absolute fucking war zone taking place directly to our south that is crossing over the actual border. And it does seem like our government is kind of looking the other way. I don't entirely blame them. It seems like it's such a messy situation. I mean, what do? You like put like actual army on the border? Do you ask Mexico, hey, do you need any help? Like, I doubt they're going to ask for it. So one of the books I got, I'm not sure if I know how to pronounce the guy's first name right, but it's called El Narco by Ion Grillo. And it's something I want to focus on this show, at the very least over the course of the next month. So that's one of the resolutions I have for 2023. The other main one is that I just want to do this thing every single day. What do we have comment-wise? I do want to actually be interactive here on twitch.tv/Gallant says, youtube.com/Paul Gallant is also how you join the show. Poor Marine. When I was in the Marines, we went to Utapo, Thailand. We were the advanced party for Operation Cobra Gold. There was CIA at that air station under the cover of meteorologists and air traffic consulting. Those dudes were dicks. I actually, poor Marine, I was watching another documentary on Netflix, and it wasn't very good. I watched like the first 30 minutes of it, but there were a bunch of Jews who joined the United States Army, and because they knew German, they were brought to this site, I guess a black site, that was in the greater DC area, and they basically like babysat Nazis, treated them well, and, you know, like, kind of interrogated them. That must have fucking sucked. You know, you're essentially like the wait staff for them. And they understood like their assignment. And I think as years go by, you become better and better at telling yourself like, hey, what I did was for a just cause. But it was like, yeah, we got to butter up these Nazis so that they share their state secrets with us. So very fascinating just to kind of see that things our government does and doesn't do. And I'm very curious as to what on our side of things, you know, it's very easy to point at the president. What on our side of things has led to the complete shit show that is south of the border? So that's something I think we're going to talk about a lot on this podcast, on this show, twitch.tv/Gallant says, youtube.com/Paul Gallant. If you want to join, I do very much appreciate you guys joining. I know this show is a little bit all over the place, but I've missed doing it, and I have to realize that even if I don't have a shit ton of preparation in front of me, that I can sometimes just go off the cuff and riff about whatever. I appreciate you guys joining me today. If you haven't already, please subscribe to this show on twitch.tv/Gallant says or youtube.com/Paul Gallant. We'll probably post a clip from the show at some point a little bit later today on YouTube. Also, check out the podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. Thank you so much for tuning in. So long, farewell. Have yourselves